Hello, this is Crispin Flintoff from Not the Andrew Marr Show. Before this video starts, I'd just like to ask if you'd subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we will be covering the general election from a totally different perspective from what you get from the mainstream media. We'll be talking about the candidates who are taking on Labour and the Tories and pushing them all the way. So please subscribe and get updates. I'm really pleased and honoured to be joined on Not the Andrew Marr Show by Hiam Bresheeth, Professor Hiam Bresheeth, from SOAS University. How are you doing, Hiam?
Thanks, fine.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to speak on the show, because there's a lot of issues that people are not really up on and don't understand with the IDF, especially what's happened in the past week, but generally how the IDF have behaved. Could you give us a bit of your background, just so we know where you're coming from?
Sure, of course. I'm very glad to be on the show. Basically, I'm an Israeli, or ex-Israeli now, who wasn't born in Israel. I come from a Jewish family from Poland, and both my parents were survivors of Auschwitz. And once they were freed from Auschwitz, once they survived Auschwitz, they actually ended up in different camps. The Nazis marched all the women that survived Auschwitz in January 1945 to Bergen-Belsen. Most of them died on the way. My mother survived just. And my father ended up in the worst camp of all, called Gusen II in Austria, where they basically built the V2 inside a mountain, very, very long channels into the mountains. And those survivors of Auschwitz ended up as human mules, pulling the the stuff that was necessary for the building of the rockets. Most of them died. 6,000 left Auschwitz, about 2,000 arrived to Gusen. I was born in a refugee camp in Italy in 1946, when my parents re-met again in Italy and married, and we came to Israel in 1948. So I was a baby. And we lived in Jabaliyah, which is part south of Jaffa, which was a town totally vacated, expelled. The whole population of Palestinians were expelled to Gaza, where they built a refugee camp called Jabalia, to remind them of their old town in Palestine. So I grew up in a strange place because it wasn't really proper Israel. All the people living there were either refugees of the Nakba or survivors of the Holocaust. There were no proper Israelis to be seen apart from the school teachers, etc. So not a typical Israeli upbringing or conditions. I became very interested in the IDF because I was not really interested in serving, but I wasn't courageous enough to actually refuse, because that would mean jail and basically being expelled from the Israeli society proper. And I was 18 and not courageous enough and not wise enough to do what later on, of course, people did. Not at the time that I was about to join. And having having spent time in 3 wars in Israel as a soldier and later as a reserve officer, I always found it very odd that most Israelis accept it as the only institution they trust. No civic institution in Israel is trusted like the IDF. And of course, you know that the IDF has actually failed many times in its duties or in its activities. It's not the great army that it is made out to be. And we could see that on the 7th of October very, very clearly. And since, of course. So I spent a few years researching the book, and I'm very glad to say that it's read in different languages. It's been translated to Greek, and I think Spanish and French are on the way.
Your book mentions that the IDF has been immune from public censure since the beginning of the State of Israel, that this has always been the case. There are certain theories about why the IDF has been immune, but what to censure? What's your view on that?
The first thing is to point out that the great shame and in a sense, guilt on different levels that people in the West felt was actually built into support of first the idea of a Jewish state, which of course the British led on in 1917, and then the support of the actual state, even though it broke all the UN resolutions since its inception. So when this Jewish state has basically wiped out many Palestinians and ethnically cleansed the rest of them, you don't find any sanctions when Israel refuses time and again to follow the UN resolutions. Israel was allowed 55% of Palestine. In other words, more than the indigenous population, though they were much less than the indigenous population in number. They were allowed most of the country, while the people who owned the country got a minority of. But this was not enough. And in the end, not 55%, but 78% was taken by the IDF.
Why doesn't the West understand what is actually happening in Israel? I mean, are they ignoring it? Because it's not just about the war crimes and the fact that Israel will not tolerate any kind of diplomatic solutions or any kind of pacifism whatsoever, that they're very aggressive and that they keep pushing for more militarism. This can't be something that the West doesn't know about. Why are they ignoring what's happening now?
I don't think they're ignoring it, Crispin. I really don't accept that reading. I know that's the reading that the West would like to present. But when Biden says, I think you should allow more aid and so on, in the morning he signs, 10,000 more bombs to Israel. And in the afternoon, he says you should allow more food in. I mean, this is the West, all right. Now, just let's think about what Israel is for the West. When Herzl wrote about it 125 years ago, the father of Zionism, as he's called, he already presented his then dream as a bulwark of the West in the Middle East. So this came to be, this really was realized, and Israel became the bulwark of the West and considered itself and is considered by the West as that bulwark. So what happens is regimes change in the Middle East, and their relationship to the West changes. Think about Egypt, think about Yemen, and all of them. Might come into the orbit of the West or might leave it. Israel is always there. It's the reliable partner against the rest in the Middle East. And this has been even before 1948, its main function. May I mention that during the 30s, the end of the 1936 to 39, most of the British army was in Palestine fighting a Palestinian uprising for 3 years. And it was fighting it on behalf of Zionism and with using Zionist forces as well. And the whole of the British army couldn't defeat them very easily for 3 years. And we start thinking about that when we see that the Israeli army, definitely one of the most terrifying armies anywhere, is unable to defeat Hamas for 6 months. So we have seen this before. But what we are forgetting is the West is a militarized colonial outfit. Look at the number of wars started by the US, the great supporter of Israel. I mean, the Americans don't resolve things hardly ever through diplomacy. They could have resolved the Ukraine situation through diplomacy, but instead they have created it by the coup and then by the way that they have engineered the war. They have not negotiated in Vietnam. They started a war. They've not negotiated anywhere else. When they had a problem in Chile, because they thought it's a problem to have a communist regime in Chile, they basically just killed everyone around. And they've done it so many, we have no time to go through the whole list. So when you are discussing the West as some kind of normative outfit that should have realized that Israel is not just armed to the teeth, but is actually a danger to every society in the Middle East and beyond. Well, this is done on behalf of the West, not against it. Israel is not doing anything that the Americans haven't done before or will not do again. Britain is also a great country for wars, as we know. When the West needed to be angry with someone, for example, in 9/11, they didn't attack Saudi Arabia, where these people supposedly came from, but they attacked Iraq. What did Iraq have to do with any of that? But, it was easy. It was on the agenda to attack Iraq for a long time. And this was not the first time Iraq was attacked, but the second. But, it was a nice and easy one to win and to destroy.
It's a bit like attacking Iraq. It was saying we have to get rid of Al-Qaeda. It was a bit like saying we have to get rid of Hamas and attacking Gaza. There's the same philosophy, the same principle. So in a way, what you're saying is that it's when we point the finger at Israel, people in the West, and how terrible it is, we should be looking at the finger pointed back at us, because we kind of go along with that terror, the terror that they are inflicting on Gaza in our own ways. Where will Israel's aggression end? I mean, what do you see as the end point? Because they cannot remove all Palestinians, surely. I mean, where will it end?
The end game is controlling the whole of Palestine and settling the whole of Palestine. So that's one end game that Zionism always had as its ultimate goal. That's not going to happen. The Palestinians are not leaving. They are not going anywhere. Even the people of Gaza will not run into the Sinai as designed by Israel. And the other end game, of course, is continued genocide. Israel is now acting in such a way that it's not very surprising if the Palestinians will become anti-Semitic, which they haven't, thankfully. But a lot of others are becoming anti-Semitic. And I'm worried about it as someone whose family was wiped out by anti-Semitism, because Israel is spreading, as exporting anti-Semitism around the world by its totally incredible disregard for humanity and for any international law system. So we're talking about the end game that I can see is the destruction of Israel from within and from without.
It's written in, you write in the book about the importance of anti-Semitism to Zionism, that sort of that the more that people who are Zionists can say there's a lot of anti-Semitism, we've got to strengthen ourselves in Israel and be safe from anti-Semitism. I mean, that's part of the Zionist outlook, isn't it? But also this paranoia about being attacked all the time. I mean, that's a pretty frightening mindset to have, this paranoia, constantly being worried that a country outside Israel will attack them, or now from within. I mean, that's just such an uncomfortable place to live, isn't it? And with that anti-Semitism aspect as well, it just seems it's not going to, you can't really advertise to Jewish people in the world to come to Israel on the basis of that, can you?
Well, let's start from your last point. A lot of the stooges of Israel in Britain, like a lot of the organized Jewish community, which is organized by Zionism, is actually spouting all kind of views which are really bizarre. For example, they say, walking in London dangerous and more dangerous than in Israel. Well, first of all, if that's the case, you would have thought that they will all be in Israel by now, because they get Israeli citizens whenever they want, as opposed to the people from Palestine. They can get citizenship in the post. So I didn't see any number of British people leaving to Israel in great numbers or in any numbers. So this is a lie that anyone who lives in London knows, that the problem of racism in London is not really against Jews, but against Muslims. And the government is actually Islamophobic, like most of European governments, like France, like Germany. And I think there's no talk about Islamophobia, and nobody is talking about the working definition of Islamophobia day and night and so on. But, my parents were killed by anti-Semitism, and the families were killed by anti-Semitism, sure. They didn't need a working definition of anti-Semitism. It was clear what is anti-Semitic. I don't think there is that type of anti-Semitism in Britain, the opposite. But of course, if this goes on, anti-Semitism will grow, because who are the anti-Semites? People that didn't go to university, that didn't study about racism, that don't know about cultural studies, and that basically are not really knowledgeable about politics. And if somebody says to them, the Jews control the world, as the 19th century was full of theorists like this, then some of them believe that, and they start acting against any Jew that they see. Now, I am not a visible Jew. So, I don't go with a kippah or with, side locks and so on. I'm going to be safe. But Jews who are visibly Jewish, like the Haredi Jews, will be in great danger. Now, the irony is that a lot of them, really good people that they are, and very Jewish that they are totally against what Israel is doing in their name. So the people who will probably suffer first from anti-Semitism are those who are opposing Israel. This is one of the very difficult conundrums. The other conundrum is the one you referred to before, and that is, how come that Israel, which is proudly the between the fourth and the sixth army in the world, under different systems of measurement. In Gaza, or for Gaza, for the war in Gaza, they had 500,000 people under arms. 500,000. This is bigger than the force of the Russian army against Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is not the biggest country in the world, but it's probably the biggest country in Europe. So think about Ukraine on one side and the Gaza Strip on the other side. It's about 3,000 times bigger, and yet the Russians have not managed to foster a force of 500,000 people, but the Israelis did. So how do you actually put into the same mental space the fact that they have one of the most fierce and destructive armies on this earth, and that they are totally afraid of, as you pointed out, of being invaded, of being taken over, of being actually exterminated by an organization like Hamas that at the best of time cannot actually muster even 6,000 or 7,000 men under arms. How can they be so frightened of Hezbollah, which is a larger organization than Hamas, where they were fighting it with an army of 250,000 people? So how is Israel strong or is Israel weak? This is a question we have to ask them. Are you the strongest guys in the Middle East, like you say, or are you the most vulnerable guys in the Middle East, like you also say? And this conundrum is alive in their brains, which actually means that there is a psychosis, a social psychosis in Israel. The Holocaust has caused it, and they still live the Holocaust in their, social psychosis of fear. Many people died on the 7th of October. We now know that at least half of them were killed by the Israeli helicopters and other tanks in the kibbutzim and so on. So if you ask who is responsible for the death on the 7th of October, then the IDF is probably leading candidate for that. They are actually in danger. Why were they in danger? Because their army is so colonial, is so full of hubris, and so dismissed and always dismissive towards Arab armies and Arab groups of resistance fighters, that it didn't consider Hamas as able and capable of doing anything. And they think they know everything that happens in the Middle East, and yet look at it. Even when they were warned by the Egyptians 3 days before the operation that something big is being cooked by Hamas, they decided, for reasons known best to themselves, because these reasons are, worth looking into, that they won't do anything. Not only that, but they removed a lot of the soldiers the day before, because obviously Hamas is not able to do anything. So this, double bind that they are living all the time, we're the strongest, and oh no, we're the weakest. They have to come to terms with it, but they cannot come to terms with, because they're colonial settlers. Colonial settlers never think that, the French never thought that the FLN could do real damage to them. The same is true in South Africa. The same is true. The British didn't believe that the Indians in 1853 or 57 could cause them real damage.
When you talk about Israel's identity, I mean, in the book that you talk about the identity being of militarism and of being united against Palestinians. I mean, that's united the left and the right in Israel. The dislike for Palestinians and the wish to take over more land. in America, obviously that was colonialized. They had hamburgers and American football to give them some cultural identity. Uh, doesn't seem that Israel's got much of an identity other than militarism, and this sort of Jewish state as its identity. Do you think that's enough as a country, or is it like you say? I mean, it's like if you don't have more than that as an identity, then it's not going to be a very happy country, is it?
Now, I want to come to your point about the Jewish state and Judaism. You said that their identity is made up of two elements of being militaristic and being Jewish. There is nothing Jewish about the Jewish state. Nothing Jewish about it. I'm, not a religious Jew. I grew up in a religious background, and I became an atheist and a Marxist. But the point is this: Judaism for 2,000 years was not militarized, not because it chose not to. It didn't have the chance to be militaristic. But actually, Jews were very happy with this. They developed a culture that was anti-militaristic, that was internationalist, that was peaceful. They were Pacific, a Pacific group. They developed, a kind of culture that was cosmopolitan in the 19th and 20th century, before others saw the point of cosmopolitanism. I'm not trying to romanticize Jewish past, but for 2,000 years, when Jews were living in societies that were not range against them, like in Al-Andalus for 800 years under the Muslim rulers. They were living in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Iraq. 2,500 years, a peaceful Jewish community lived in an Arab Muslim country without any problems until Zionism came over. So we are talking about Judaism as a very Pacific, a very long history of pacifism in the Arab East, but also in the Arab West and in Europe. Israel is not a Jewish state because it is against Jewish history, against Jewish tradition. This is what I was discussing when I was talking about in the book and elsewhere about Zionism opposition to the Jews who survived the Holocaust. They really suffered. Like my parents were not allowed to speak Yiddish, to read Yiddish, to see cinema and theater in Yiddish. For example, it was illegal to produce theater in Yiddish for a period. There was a special tax on paper that was printed in Yiddish. That tax didn't exist on any other language in Israel, but it existed on Yiddish. It was a cultural war on the culture of the diaspora. So if the diaspora lasted 2,000 years, Zionism in its 100 years and a bit history has fought everything Jewish. Everything Jewish. So there is nothing Jewish about occupation, about stealing the land, about apartheid, about genocide. There is nothing, not a single Jewish tradition that is backing this illegality, this immorality. And we need to say this loud and clear to Jews who support Israel. Shame on you. Shame on you that you have decided to support a militaristic society, which is illegal and immoral and anti-Jewish. And you have abandoned Jewishness, and your new God is the IDF. This is exactly what has happened.
People saying, "Oh, we should stop arming Israel," but from what I've read, Israel has a lot of arms and is selling arms to us. So how does that work? I mean, wouldn't it be better if we didn't buy arms from Israel? I mean, what's your view on that?
Well, I think it's a bad thing that Israel exists. So what it does is it's not just a militaristic society, but it lives from militarism. In other words, it lives from conflict. This is what actually makes Israel tick financially, not just socially. So Israel is selling between 140 and 150 states. In other words, most of the members of the UN, there are 200 or 199 this year. It's selling most of them its armaments. Let's just take highlights of the last few years. India, one of the biggest armies in the world, one of the biggest, the second biggest country on the planet in terms of population, is getting most of its arms from Israel. Now, India is one of the biggest countries. Israel is one of the smallest countries, and yet it is producing the arms for a giant like India. You have to ask yourself what is going on here. Now, let's go back to a bit closer to home. Azerbaijan has defeated Armenia in 2022 by taking over the region called Nagorno-Karabakh. This was defended by Armenia for a long, long time. And without the drones and other missiles that Israel sold Azerbaijan, they couldn't have won that war. The Armenian army had a lot of armament from Russia. So they had lots of tanks. And Israel produced and sold Azerbaijan, a suicide drone, a large drone with a large explosive that attacks tanks and finishes them off. And hundreds of tanks were actually destroyed in a very short time, all by this Israeli drone and other missiles. So Israel has made it possible for a whole number of countries to win wars, mainly, against their own citizens. This is what Israel is very good at, is working with tyrants and dictators against their own populations. Israel is selling to most large cities on earth systems of spying on their citizens through public cameras. Basically, the software hijacks public cameras and uses them without the knowledge of their owners against people who demonstrate, against all kind of things. Now, this is not new. Of course, we know about the production by Israel of software that takes over our telephones. I know, because my telephone was hijacked. So by Pegasus, yeah. So this is not a new thing. Israel is very good at using illegal means to fight legal populations without them knowing about it, without them being able to act against it. So this is what it is selling to cities, not just armies, but cities everywhere. It's selling about, we don't know the figures because they keep them secret, but a minimum of $12 billion a year and a maximum of twice that was achieved, I think, in 2022. So Israel thought that this is the best year they ever had. And how wrong were they? Because, of course, that is the year that the war in Ukraine started. And that is the year that most European countries started buying arms from Israel. For example, Germany is buying most of its missiles from Israel, not from the United States, because the American missiles don't work. Now, the UK is selling to Israel about $500 million worth of arms every year. It's probably buying from Israel more than that. The figure again is kept secret. So this is not a lot.
So stopping buying would be as effective as stopping selling.
Stopping buying will be even more effective, because, Israel is selling so much arms. If India stopped buying from Israel, that would be a hit. It will hit the economy. The economy in Israel is hit anyway by the war. It's already lost 20% of its value.
I've got one final question for you. Okay, so you've done really well so far. It's just the last one. Let's see how you do on this one. Someone's written to me to say that they think that Israel has nuclear weapons, and that may well be a reason why the West is not prepared to do anything to provoke them. What's your view on that?
Well, I don't think there is any doubt that Israel has nuclear weapons. The Israelis are very happy to be kind of two-faced about this, to say we don't admit or deny the existence of nuclear weapons, because that's a positive deterrent, by saying we don't admit or deny. It's clear that they have nuclear weapon and everyone accepts this. So we shouldn't play the game that Israel is playing by saying we are not sure. It's like those people are saying, let's wait for the ICJ to say that Israel is committing genocide. Well, Israel is committing genocide. Every human being, and definitely every lawyer that knows the books on the Genocide Convention, realizes we don't need to wait for the ICJ, and we don't need to wait in the other case. So basically, Israel is a nuclear country. There is an argument about how many nuclear heads and of different types it owns, and the normal number is between 200 and 300 nuclear devices. We don't know if all of them are actually in working order, and I am not actually anxious to find out how many of them work, and I suggest that to the rest of us not to. So basically, Israel is a nuclear empire. It's very small, but how many countries have between 200 and 300 nuclear devices? I don't think Pakistan and India are in that league either. Why does Israel have those devices? Because the United States, UK, France, and other countries helped it to get that. And why did they do that? Well, let us ask our leaders why they did that and why they still support and shield Israel from the International Atomic Energy Commission. Why did they do this? Because Israel is refusing to join and is refusing to allow people like Scott Ritter that went to Iraq to find nuclear devices to check Israel. They, of course, can't afford to do that. The Iranians allowed this, but Israel does not allow it. So first of all, yes, they have it. Now, would they use them? Israel is playing the game that we call in Hebrew the Samson option. The Samson option is, if everything is lost, we'll bring the house down with us in it. Yeah. So this is like in the history of Israeli mythology, is the Masada event. Let's commit suicide and bring down as many of our enemies as possible. Only mad politicians ever subscribe to this madness. But Israel is full of mad politicians, I'm sorry to say. And what they do now is not just criminal, but also mad. So Israel is playing this game of hold me so I won't hit you. I'm very dangerous. I don't know my own mind. I can do everything and anything. So just hold me so that I won't be as nasty as I can be. This is the game of Israel. And, you know, a lot of European leaders think, well, we better be on the good side of Israel, because you never know with those guys. Who would have said Israel would commit genocide in Gaza a year ago? Who would say this? You know, people like me have written this for years, that they will come to a point that they need, from their ideological and political you know, point of view, they need to commit genocide because ethnic cleansing has not worked, has not provided the cleansing of Israel, of Palestine, that they need in order to control it all. They need to get rid of the Palestinians. They don't need to get rid of the Palestinians for petty reasons. They need to get rid of the Palestinians because of their Holocaust mindset, that you cannot live with the non-Jews around you. They do believe that. Now, here I am living in Britain quite happily with, you know, millions of non-Jews around me, and it makes me feel a bit safer than living in Israel with a lot of Jews around me. And, you know, obviously people will say this is anti-Semitic, but they are idiotic if they say that, because basically a lot of militarized Zionist Jews are very dangerous to themselves, not just to the people around them. So the nuclear option for Israel is the last stick to wield against, and they are now wielding it against Iran. Just imagine, Iran is a country with population bigger than that of the United Kingdom, that Israel is now wielding its nuclear weapons, reminding Iran that it can destroy it all. Now, is this a normal world that we live in, when this is happening and is acceptable, and the person, as in the people who do it, are our partners, the partners we cherish and support for their criminality? I mean, I think this is a crisis of the whole world. Gaza is a crisis of humanity, not of Israel versus Hamas. This is nonsense. The whole of our human race is now in a crisis. Who do we support? Do we support people that want to live, or would we support people who want to kill and destroy, like the Israelis are doing in Gaza? This is the real agenda.